All right. So today we are going to do ad hoc networks, and most of it is actually about routing in ad hoc networks. So first we will talk about what is it that makes ad hoc networks difficult, where they are used, what are the problems. Then we compare them with the cellular networks, which are obviously not ad hoc. Then we talk about routing in ad hoc networks. So this is in some sense a shorter lecture, but basically mostly on the ad hoc, and we'll talk about three routing methods. One is dynamic source routing, then AODD and OLSR. All right. So ad hoc, we already know what is an ad hoc network. Ad hoc network where everybody talks to everybody directly. So for example, many of you have laptops here, and all of them are equipped with the ad hoc property. And you could connect to each other computer and transmit the messages for yourself as well as for others. So for example, if a message has to go from here to there, it could go from that to that to that to that to that. All right. So that means you really don't need to have an access point or anything for that transmission. And I think when we talked about first time about the ad hoc networks, I mentioned that if you are in a place where you have two laptops and you want to transfer the file from one to the next, you can just try ad hoc method, and you don't need a USB or a wire or anything like that. You just connect. And you can do that with your cell phones. If you want to transfer something from your computer to your cell phone, you can create an ad hoc network. Right in the spot, and then you can connect, you can update, you can sync whatever you need to do with your computer and your phone. So those are some of the applications. Then dynamic topology. The main thing is that everybody is moving among these things. These are mobile devices, and therefore, right now this is the path, but that may not be available a minute later. Things move very fast. Multi-hopping, and you will have to go over the obstacles. You will have to basically worry about energy conservation and spectrum reuse. Energy conservation comes up more, but let's see. First of all, you have, if somebody else is speaking, you may not be able to speak, and then you may have to go around or something like that, right? So that is that will be another reason you have to do multi-hop. In fact, we have another lecture, a complete lecture on what we call mesh networks, in which this is very similar. So we have three lectures actually. This one is ad hoc, the next one is sensor, and after that is mesh. Each of them has a different issue, slightly different issue. And so, and some issues are very overlapping. Multi-hopping, for example, in mesh networks also you go multi-hops. But the key difference between mesh and ad hoc is that ad hoc has no base, no tower. Right? In the mesh, you might have a tower. Alright? So the key thing that distinguishes an ad hoc from everything else is that there is no tower, right? There is no central point. So this is, you do multi-hopping here as well. Then self-organization. So the thing is, since things are changing, and not in one, they might get an organization control, but not necessary. In that case, how do you assign the addresses? How do you find the route? And then how do you find the location? How do you do power control? And here after the word clustering, which means that if some people are close to each other, then you can form a cluster and a group or a community. And then when they want to have some other cluster, then only they do something special. So all of those things have to be self-organizing, means you just do it on the spot. Energy conservation is basically related to sleeping. So how do if we are going to be forwarding messages for others, even if I don't have any messages, can I go to sleep? There is much more difficult than sleeping is much more difficult in ad hoc networks than in infrastructure based, because in infrastructure based the base tower is always awake and everybody can go to sleep. Scalability. Thousands of nodes. It could be a very big number of nodes. And when we talk about sensor networks, we'll see that those could be ad hoc networks with hundreds of thousands of nodes. And obviously they don't have to be hundreds of, you could have just 2 nodes as well, right? Bandwidth constraint. And since these all nodes are have little power, the bandwidth is very little. The throughput is basically always, generally these are all congested networks. And mostly, the load level is high. That's kind of a norm that, that there is congestion because the number of links available is very few. All right. So these are some of the common, some of the challenges in ad hoc networks. So where do we use them? Okay. Can anybody think about some applications where we will need to use ad hoc networks? Highways. Yeah. So if you want to communicate on the highway, one way would be that on the cars you could have wireless network, and one car could pass on the message to the other car, to the other car, to the other car, and it will go multiple hops ahead. And some car might have a tower and could just pass on the tower at that point, and then it can go to the internet or wherever it wants to go to. So that is one application. Any other application? Can you think of? Right. So the thing is, military is a good example. Actually, it turns out military is the biggest funder of this kind of research because they cannot put a tower. Why can't they put a tower? Yeah, there is a single point of failure. If you want to disrupt the communication, you don't need to look for any cell phones. You just found the tower. It is very visible, highly visible from distance. And so anybody who is in the security business will not have a tower. And so basically, so it is very useful in those situations where you don't want to have a single point of failure. So anyway, that brings us to this list of applications. First is emergency. Somewhere where you didn't even think that we need a tower. So if there is let's say, an earthquake in Haiti, you probably had a tower before, but it's gone, right? And you need to communicate. So how do you communicate in emergency situations? Ad hoc is much better than infrastructure based. And suppose you have an emergency on a mountain, or in some remote area. How do you communicate? Easiest thing is to do ad hoc. Behavioral computing. Behavioral computing is a new branch where you put devices on your body. So there might be a display on your eyes, a hearing aid, a heart device, so on and so forth. Some other body sensors for other medical reasons. So that's a behavioral computing. You just wear those devices like a cloth. And so there it might be ad hoc. Although, you could think of that, you could have one central device which does communication among them. Battlefield, we talked about that. Hybrid. So in many applications, we use both ad hoc and infrastructure based together. So the cell tower is there, but then it cannot reach that distant area. So you will get up to as far as you can get to using the cell tower, and then you will go ad hoc. So that's a hybrid communication. Mesh networks and sensor networks. So I said that mesh networks use ad hoc operation, and they don't have to because they could have a tower. And the sensor networks use ad hoc networks. Again, they don't have to. They could have some clustering where this whole cluster has some more powerful node that can communicate. But most of these are ad hoc. Okay, so these these are multiple uses of ad hoc networks. So here it turns out that, and I must point out that there's a lot more research on ad hoc networks, a lot more papers on ad hoc networks, a lot more books on ad hoc networks, wireless networks than on the centralized one. Simply because there's a lot more challenges, a lot more to publish. But in terms of applications, all the applications are somewhat that we don't see every day. For example, we see the infrastructure based every day. 100 times a day you make a phone call, which is infrastructure based. And in fact, you might even do your cell phone to computer communication using infrastructure, using access point. So both your cell phone and your computer connect to the same access point, as opposed to doing ad hoc based, which you would do. Right? So ad hoc is not very much used in public as such. It is invisible in itself, commonly used, but it is there somewhere. Okay? All right. Sensor network is what we have used, and we have a whole lecture on it. The next lecture is on sensor networks. Here we just want to point out that generally, let's say in agricultural fields here, we could put lots of sensors. We could put a moisture sensor, we could put a temperature sensor, we could put some other kinds of sensors. So this is a sensor field where there are lots of sensors, and now we want to monitor them. So somewhere sitting far away, we want to get all this information as to what is the temperature, what is the rain level, what is the moisture and all that. And then so that goes to the internet and we can monitor it. Right? So there are several issues in that one, and we will have a whole lecture on sensor networks. The key issues are scalability, how many nodes can you do that, monitor, power consumption. So those sensor networks are the most power constrained devices. Cell phones you can recharge every day. But sensors you put into the field, you cannot change the batteries, you cannot recharge them. They are there for years. Right? Fault tolerance. If something goes wrong, you can fix it, but in the sensors, if they go wrong, they're not, basically. I mean, you're not going to go and look for that. I mean, generally, you just put a few more, and then as long as you're getting data from somebody else, you're okay. So fault tolerance is another one. Data fusion. How does the data fusion? Data fusion basically means two things. First of all, that much of the data is same. So if this sensor is saying the temperature is 50 degrees, this one saying temperature is 50 degrees most likely. So we need to send 4 data points which say 50 degrees, that we can somehow combine it. Right? Compress the data. Second thing is, how does the data get, so finding the path. So that is part of, sending the data and then compressing it. Then the traffic. So the traffic is very low throughput. I mean, you are getting data, let's say, once a day. You're getting the temperature, maybe 5 times a day. Right? So, and once you get it, it is delay sensitive in the sense that you don't want to get yesterday's temperature or yesterday's rain level, or anything like that. So when you want to get it, if something is wrong, you need to know now. Right? So it's very delay sensitive. So these are some of the things. And so over the last 5, 6, actually not 5, 6, let's say last 10 years or so, there's been a lot of research on sensor networks. And we have a very active program here at WashU also. And so this has been a topic that we'll discuss a little bit more, but this is an interesting, challenging topic. So going back to that talk, several issues, several challenges. First is media access. How do we communicate? Because if there is no base station, there is no time sync. Everybody has their own clock, and they are running at their own rate. So clock synchronization is a big problem. So I cannot say, well, here slot number 1, here slot number 2, I will transmit at time 3 seconds, and I will transmit at 2 seconds. Right? This is distributed, no time sync. Directional antennas, and if the antennas are directional, then basically you cannot even see the whole thing. So we don't even know all the neighbors. And if they are not directional, you cannot go very far. So All those things have to be taken into account when designing a media access scheme for ad hoc networks. Routing. Since we don't know the topology, how do we find the route? And how do we ensure that the things are not just going back in circle? That I send you the packet, you send it to somebody else, they send it back to me, and it just goes around. So loop free. And how long will it take before I know the route? Multicasting. Now, in ad hoc networks, multicasting is quite common. So, for example, emergency situation, you want to tell everybody, please, there is a fire here, don't come near, route 23 or whatever. So that's a multicast, rather than unicast, which is more common in other communications. So in the emergency situation, military situation, we want to tell the same thing to 1,500 soldiers. Right? So multicast is quite common. Transport layer has to be designed so that it can go over this path base. Thing is, TCP doesn't really like highly varying delays. Once you take 1 millisecond and then you take 100 milliseconds, it gets very confused whether there is a timeout or not. Right? So it has to be designed so that a transport layer that can survive over path breaks. Quality of service is always an issue, and it's more of an issue in ad hoc. Self-organization. As we said, that to find out who your neighbors are, and when the neighbors are gone, you tell the whole world that my neighbor is gone. Security. Denial of service attacks. So security, denial of service attack, jamming, and energy depletion. So denial of service and jamming will be quite common in the military environment, where you would intentionally transmit the signal so that the enemy cannot communicate. And denial of service is one way of jamming. Jamming is more physically a thing where you send out the frequency signal, as opposed to denial of service to send out a request, which cause overload. Depletion, energy depletion, and have them transmit so much that the battery runs out. Energy management. So that leads to energy management, that how much power you transmit, how you monitor the battery, how you monitor the processing power, and then you give the load accordingly. If somebody doesn't have battery, you don't want them to be transmitting packets for others. If somebody doesn't have a powerful processor, then they would probably be not doing work for others as well. So those issues have to be taken into account. Addressing and service discovery. How do you find out who is around? I mean, basically, you have to find out their addresses. How do we address the different objects? And how do we find different services that we need in this environment? It could be basically globally. Pricing schemes. So what is the incentive for relaying? So if we have an ad hoc networks, and this is why it fails in many of the applications where for example, people wanted to do your internet access by ad hoc. You get the service and you transmit. You let me forward my packet to your service. That doesn't work out. How do you pay these people who are doing all this service for other people? Anyway, the reason I've listed all these last 10 things is because there are papers on each of those 10 things. So there are lots of papers on multicasting, lots of papers on routing, lots of papers on pricing, addressing, and so on and so forth. These are the interesting research topics. However, we will concentrate on one thing, which is the routing. And the reason because we are concentrating on one is because if you are interested in ad hoc network, then you will read, and these are research topics, probably reading a lot more about whatever topic you're working on in ad hoc. So before we go to routing, let's just compare the cellular versus ad hoc. So actually, I should have not said cellular. I should have said infrastructure-based versus ad hoc. Cellular is the best example of infrastructure-based because you have a tower, right? So here there is infrastructure, there is no infrastructure in the ad hoc. Mostly the single hop. Everybody talks directly to the tower. Right? Here is multi-hop because you are going from one point to the next. Routing is centralized. So the tower decides how to send basically, and if there are multiple towers, they decide which tower will connect to whom. Here it is all distributed. Base station is single point of failure in the case of infrastructure. Here it is resilient, means you cannot just kill one node and everything will still work. Seamless connectivity. And here frequent link breaks. So that's the thing, is it is much more continuous operation on the left side, where on the right side it is more discontinuous operation. You have connectivity, you don't have connectivity. You have a neighbor, you don't have a neighbor. Right? High cost and long deployment time. So if you want to install a cellular tower, we need few months, right? Few days. And whereas on the right side, you don't need few days. You just bring the trucks, and they all communicate with each other, right? So that's why in the emergency situations where things have to be done right away, we find that ad hoc is much better than infrastructure based. And they could bring a truck, a big tower, and everybody will, and then some of that truck talks to something, but that would take a lot more time. All right, high cost and long deployment. We finished that. Commercial sector. So this is what is used in the commercial, where you need continuity, where you need guarantees, where you need things like that. Then you go into cell phone business, is actually infrastructure based. But this is used where it is not really service provider, it is more of a emergency situation, disaster situation, defense. Those are the applications for it. All right, two different sectors. The mobile is, because of the infrastructure, what we do is your cell phone is very simple and very lightweight. On the other side, the mobile device has to have complete thing. It has to have a forwarder, a router, and everything else built in. So those devices are generally bigger, right? Because there's nothing to help. So complex base station, and in this case, complexity is in the mobile. No forwarding fairness issues. Fairness on versus other traffic. So in the case of the ad hoc networks, you have to be fair as to how much load you put on others and how much others put on you. Right? If you send one message a day and you're transmitting 100 messages to other people, you will feel that I'm not being treated fairly. Right? Because you're doing jobs for others, or others are not doing jobs for you, whereas that is not the issue in the infrastructure based. Time sync. Time sync is very difficult in ad hoc because everybody is disconnected and on their own. But it is very easy to do in infrastructure based. Basically, every base station or the access point, they send out a beacon. Right? When the beacon arrives, you know exactly that this is the start of the time. Right? As opposed to in the case of you have lots of beacons and it is kind of difficult to synchronize. So because there's no time synchronization, you cannot do TDMA. In TDMA means time division multiple access. You cannot do start and stuff and you say, well, this time for me, this time for you, this time for you. Right? You cannot do that. So mostly you do CSMA. CSMA, you just see somebody else is speaking. If they're not, you speak. Carriers and multiple access. Static frequency reuse and dynamic frequency reuse. So here, in the case of cellular towers, and if you remember the frequency reuse plan we had, where we said, well, we divide the cell into three sectors. Here I use frequency number 1, here I use frequency number 2. This was also a question in the exam. I use frequency number 3, frequency reuse. So that is static, that continues for years, same way. Right? The next cell will use this other frequency, the next cell will use another frequency. In the ad hoc, that is not possible to do. Things are too dynamic. And therefore, you have dynamic frequency reuse. And so you just try whatever frequency you want to transmit on and see if somebody else is transmitting and listening on that one. Right? So anyway, so the world is much more chaotic here on the right side. But by necessity, because in those situations, we can't have the peace that we need on the left side. All right? Any questions about that whole matrix? the media access control. And so when you have media access control, these are the issues which are really, normal wireless issues. Except that now that we are going half by half, they become more amplified. So we already know that hidden node, what is a hidden node? So for example, if C is talking to B, A could be interfering, but C cannot hear A. So A is hidden for C, similarly C is hidden for A. Why? Because they're both trying to talk to B and they're thinking that they're the only speakers, they're doing carrier sense. Do not find any other guy, another person, and then but they're interfering, right? So that is a hidden node. Second thing is exposed node. When C is talking to B, D cannot talk. Right? Because media is busy. Right? So D is exposed by C's transmission. Use of directional antennas or steerable antennas, so that actually helps. So basically, if C has a directional antenna, then when it is talking to B, D will not be exposed. And steerable antenna basically means that you can change the direction. Directional antenna means you have all the power going in this direction, but if you can move that direction, and that steering you can do manually, with a motor, or you can do electronically, where we change the phase of the transmission such that the transmission is now in this direction as opposed to this direction. Nothing moves physically, but the signal direction has changed. So there are antenna designs which are steerable antennas. Then we have multiple access collision avoidance. So the way we do multiple access collision avoidance is using RTS and CTS. Anybody remember what is RTS and CTS? Ready to send and confirm to send. Did you say confirm? Clear to send, clear to send, that's right. So basically you will say request to send, ready to send, and then you get the confirmation that, yep, I can send, you can send. With binary backup as in 8.11. So that could be used. Anyway, so that is media access control. Then the question is routing. Routing is the media access control is very similar to other wireless networks, but routing is much more challenging here. But it is fully distributed, and you cannot have a global state. Global state means we cannot keep track of the whole network. So for example, if I were to keep track of all the nodes that are here right now, and I knew what is their power, reachability, and frequency, and so on and so forth, then I would have easy time how to go from here to there, right? But you cannot do that because it is very expensive. So we have to work on the local information. And obviously we have got loop-free routing. And the biggest thing is that how long will it take for me to find the path? So obviously there are two ways. One is that we keep finding the path. Even if we don't need it, we just find the path. What is the best path for 1, 2, 3, 4, 5? And then once the time packet comes for 2, we know exactly where to send it. That is called proactive. Proactive means you're just finding the path. Now, if the traffic level is very low, let's say traffic level is 1 message a day, would proactive be a good idea? Because you're just wasting whole day finding the path, you're losing battery here, right? And so proactive is good when the load levels are high. Right? So, and second thing is, it also depends on how often the network changes. If the network is changing very fast, then proactive doesn't help that much. Right? On the other hand, if the network is changing very slowly, then proactive is good. I have the information, it will be good for an hour at least, right? Or for 2 hours, or a whole day. So the more static the information is, more it is useful to know the path before it is required. Quick reconfiguration, adapt to the frequent changes, changes in unrelated parts will not impact the node. Now, if something breaks over there, why do I care? Because I'm here and I just want to communicate with a few nodes here. So then, there is no point in broadcasting to the whole world that this link has failed. So some of these issues are different than in the wired networks. Energy conservation, sleep periods. So we have to worry about when the nodes are sleeping and then they will wake up and then the links will become available. Unidirectional link support. And sometimes the links are one direction. I can reach you, but you cannot reach me. Okay? It could just be in the transmission power. I have a lot more power and I can send it to you. You can receive it, but you don't have enough power to reach me back. Okay? And so, how do you do that? So basically, what is happening is there are hundreds of papers on routing, and some of them will support unidirectional, some of them support bidirectional, some of them do. So these are all the issues that they solve. So the goal is to minimize bits transmitted divided by the bits delivered. So if suppose we have bits delivered is the number of bits that really reach the destination. So if we send 100 bits, for that we have to transmit 1500 bits. So that ratio generally is equal to the average number of hops. If you take 100 bits and transmit it one hop, it is 1500, then second hop, another 1500, third hop, another 1500, and so on and so forth. So if you divide the bits transmitted, total bits transmitted by all the stations, divide the total bits delivered to the destination, that will give you the average number of hops. Make sense? Yeah. Question? Yeah. So let me repeat the question. Question is, if you do not have the global information, how can you guarantee loop 3? The answer is no. The more global information you have, the more you can guarantee. The less global information you have, the less you can guarantee. So it's not 0 or 1, it's just trade-off. Right? So basically, the more overhead you spend, the more guarantees you get, but then the question is, do you want to spend that much overhead of keeping the state? And so that's the correct observation that if you don't have complete information, you cannot guarantee loop 3 routing. And second point then here is control bits versus the data bits. So for every transition, the packet header and the headers, you may have to have retransmissions. So all of these are overhead. Control packets versus by data packets. So there are two ways to make it divide. How many bits were transmitted extra? How many packets were transmitted extra? All right. So either one. So there are two ways to, and we want to minimize all of these things. All right. So there are hundreds of, actually, as I said, this is a very active area of research. So the book, Murthy and Manoj's book, lists 40 plus routing schemes for ad hoc networks. There is a chapter on ad hoc networks. That's the book we use once for textbook, and actually it is referred in many of these lectures, and it's on 2-hour reserve library. And this is the classification of these schemes. So these schemes are classified based upon the routing updates. The routing updates can be proactive, reactive, or hybrid. Proactive means before you need that, you just find the route. Reactive means when you need the route, you find it. So if packet comes, now you say, oh, how do I reach 10? Then you ask somebody, can you tell me how to reach 10? Or do you know how to reach 10? That is reactive. Right? And hybrid is a combination of the two. So hybrid means you will have some proactive and some reactive. And so you will know some neighbors, and then others you will do on demand. Temporal information. Which part of the time axis you use. If you just keep a history, that is past information, that is one way. Something is your prediction. If you try to predict in the future, that will be another. So, prediction actually could be, for example, when we have these satellites, what are called these LEOs, low orbit satellites. We know that they will come in for 6 hours a day. They're not there all the time. But we know what time they will come in. So you could do that, okay, I will send this packet at 6 o'clock. Okay? And there are other things that can happen, if they talk about bus networks and things like that. So actually what time the bus will come, and then the network access will be available, and then when it goes away, you can't, right? So that would be your prediction. Topology organization. Whether the topology is flat or hierarchical. Flat means everybody has a globally unique address. Hierarchical means, we have a community and we have a unique address here, but then, those might be repeated in that community, but if you combine the community address and the local address, it will become globally unique. So you could have hierarchical addressing. Right? This could be geographical or by half distance. Geographical means we could say US addresses, Chinese addresses, Korean addresses. Then in US you could have Missouri, California, Massachusetts, and so on and so forth. Or by half distance there, you have just everything 1 half, everything 2 half, everything 3 halves. So you could define topology like that. So there are differences in the different schemes. Resource optimization, power aware. Some are basically trying to minimize the battery consumption. Some are trying to use the geographical information. Some are trying to minimize the flooding, and so on. So there are many issues in terms of how the routing works. Now, having said that, this is a very rich area, and already listed 4 in that book, I'm going to just cover 3 schemes. Why 3 schemes? Because these 3 schemes have found real application in the real world. And these 3 schemes actually have been standardized by IETF. So there are 3 RFCs, and so most of the real world uses those RFCs. Yeah, question? So the thing is, okay, so there are 2 things, 2 answers to this. First of all, every time somebody publishes a paper, they will have their issue, favorite issue, saying that, look, we do the best battery power consumption. So if that is your concern, then there is access as to how much other people are doing in battery power, how much we are doing, right? But then there are survey papers. And the job of the survey papers is to categorize all these schemes and put them in proper perspective. So there are survey papers on ad hoc networks. And then basically what happens is, based upon these surveys and based upon other people's experiences, that's how those 3 schemes that have been selected, they have come up, is because they seem to represent what we consider quote best. Obviously people are publishing papers even after those 3 have been accepted and better than those, right? So for the time being, those are the considered the best. So if your question was, have people classified these things? Yes. And this slide actually was exactly that the routing scheme can be classified based upon these 4 criteria. And so if you have a particular scheme, it could be proactive, which uses the past history, has a flat addressing, and is power aware, for example. Okay, so you just take one option from each of those things. Alright, before I talk about those three schemes, let's just review routing. Now we have done this in 473, but it has been a year since we took 473, so you might have forgotten. So this is one slide summary of routing. How do we find a path? There are two schemes. One is called distance vector, another is called link state. And now this applies to wire networks. Okay? If you remember distance vector and link state. So what we do is in distance vector is that I, for example, keep a list of distance to everybody. I say he is one hop at a cost of very low cost. And C is at 2 hops and the cost is so much. He is at 3 hops. So from the whole world, I know exactly how much the cost is to reach, for me to reach there. Right? And I tell it to my neighbors. So my neighbors have these 3 nodes here. So I tell them, look, my cost to the rest of the world is this, the whole table. And I tell this other neighbor, the whole table. And then I tell this other neighbor, the whole table. Then they can calculate if what is their best cost by having the previous table and this new information that I just gave them. They can decide whether to reach that other person they should go through me or they should go through this other person. Right? That is distance vector. In distance vector, we take the whole worldwide table and give it to our neighbors. Right? Table is very big, but we give it only to a small number of people. The other choice is to not really have this big table, but just to tell the whole world that I have 3 neighbors. First neighbor is this, second neighbor is this, third neighbor is that. The cost to the first neighbor is so much, cost to the second neighbor is so much. So basically, I tell my neighbors about my neighbors to the whole world. Right? So the table is very small, it's just 3 neighbors. But I have to send it to 15 people. Right? So they can get the global information. So they can look at everybody's table and say, yeah, we can't reach this node, then the best path is this one. So there are 2 methods to find the shortest path. One is distance vector, and the second is link state. The way we remember these names is that the distance vector itself says that I need to know the distance to everybody, and that's a big table, and we send it to whom? Neighbors, a small number of people. A big table, a small number of people. The second option is link state. Link state means connectivity state. Right? Who are my neighbors? And we tell it to whole world. Probably the number of bytes will come out the same thing by the time they have done it. You know, transmitted that small table to a lot of people, or large table to a small number of people. It's the same. But there are other properties that we will not go here today, but there are other properties that actually have made link state a more desirable method. Initially, internet used, or initial routing protocols used distance vector, and REP is an example. REP is routing information protocol. That was the first protocol for routing, and that was distance vector based. Now we use OSPF, Open Shortest Path First Routing, OSPF, and that is link state based. Now I don't know if any of you remember what was the problem with it. Psalm 473. What is the problem with distance vector? Huh? Yeah. Yeah. So basically, if somebody dies, if some link disconnects, then it takes quite a bit of time for the whole world to know that. Okay, everybody is saying, well, I have this path, this table, that table is wrong, but it is getting communicated for quite a bit, and it decreases very slowly. And so the bad news travels very slowly. So people might be sending the packets the wrong way for quite some time. So what we call is that the convergence after a link break was very slow. slow convergence. Anyway, there are two algorithms we use for routing by finding the shortest path. One is called Dijkstra, one is called Bellman-Ford. We will not go through those algorithms, but basically Dijkstra is used for distance vector and Bellman-Ford is used for link state. Alright, all of you had done when you took 473 here, you have done examples on Dijkstra and Bellman-Ford and tables and all that. So we're not going to do that, but just the reason I want to remind you that you're going to use this thing in the next few slides. Alright, so I think I have covered everything on this slide. Any question about these two? Alright, so one of the protocols that is used in ad hoc networks is called OLSR, Optimized Link State Routing. You see the word link state right there? That means we are going to do something with link state. Optimized. So what is optimized about it? So OLSR, now reason we are talking about these three is because there is a group in IETF called MANET, or MANET actually, M-A-N-E-T, is Mobile Ad Hoc Networks, M-A-N-E-T, Mobile Ad Hoc Networks, MANET. And once somebody told me, somebody who I respect said that, look, a lot of people mispronounce it MANET, so it's not a French word. That net is pronounced fully, so it's a MANET. Okay, so that group has standardized many, these three, and actually there are some new ones, but these three I will talk about. OLSR is first one. OLSR is proactive. Proactive means the routes are prepared before needed, and it is optimized. Optimized means, remember, in the link state, what we do is we tell about the neighbors to the whole world. Right? So there is a lot of flooding. And we don't want to do unnecessary work because there is a link state here, which is good. Link state is good, but then in a lot of flooding is not good. Not in wireless networks with battery constraints. So we optimize it. Now listen carefully, but this is certainly going to be the exam, okay? I can't make exam without this particular slide being in the, and actually there might be a homework for this one too. So what we do is we send it to, say, to my neighbors, and the neighbors send it to their neighbors, the neighbors send it to their neighbors. There is a lot of duplication, right? So what we do is we select some neighbors and say, look, you are my MPR. You are my best friend. Okay? And everybody else will get the information, but they will keep it for themselves. They won't send it further. The MPR will send it to all its neighbors. Alright? And I could have more than one MPR. Right? And so the number of MPRs will depend. I want to make sure somehow that everybody gets it. Alright? So if X is your MPR, you are X's MPR selector. So if he is my MPR, then I am the MPR selector. I selected an MPR. Each node sends link state to all its neighbors. So everybody sends it to all the neighbors. So I'm going to send it to all my neighbors, you're going to send it to all your neighbors, and everything else, right? But for the other people's link state, only MPRs broadcast. We send that only MPRs will send their selectors link state route vectors for us. Alright. Other neighbors use information. Now, based upon this, you can just use, Bellman-Ford. What happened here? hopefully it will come up while we are, you have the slide, I have the slide, we'll continue. Use development, so use development for to find it out, right? OLSR significantly reduces the LS control traffic. What is the control traffic? All these routing messages are control traffic, right? There is no data in them. I mean, data will come, somebody will want to send a packet from A to B, that is data packet. But before the data packet come in, finding the route, all these routing messages are control traffic. Control traffic are overhead. And so OLSR reduces that overhead. Now let's just see, let me see the next slide here. So the next slide has the example of OLSR. Slide number 13. So on that slide, node 5 is in the middle, blue node, 5 is in the middle, and it has selected 4 and 8 as MPR. Now, how many neighbors does 5 have? So it has basically 5 have neighbors, 2, 3, 4, 6, 8, 7. 7 neighbors, right? So 5 will send to all its neighbors. What will it send? Remember, this is linked states. What is 5 sending to all the neighbors? It just tells that who it is connected to. So it says, well, I have connectivity to 7, 11, 2, 3, 4, 6, 8, and it does the same guys that I'm connected to. And not only the same, but you also have connected to the other nodes which you don't know probably. But so we tell that, right? Now what happens? So 2, 3, 7, 11, those are not MPR. Only 2 MPRs are 4 and 8. Right? So what will 4 do with that information? It will send to all its neighbor because it knows that you are its MPR selector. It will send. Now it will send to whom? It will send to 1, 13, 12, and 6. That it will not send back to you. Obviously, that will be a waste of time to telling you that it was me. So it will accept you, it will tell everybody else that 5 has connected to 2, 3, 4, 6, 8, 7, and 11. So 4 will tell, so you think this is on? Okay, we'll today manage without the projector, I suppose. So everybody can see that the 4 will tell to all its neighbor the connectivity of 5. Right? Similarly, 8 is also a selector MPR for 5, and therefore 8 will tell to all its neighbor, which includes 6, 12, 10, and 9. Right? So now the 6 has duplicate information. How does it have duplicate information? Because it has already heard from 5, and it also heard from 8. And also heard from 4. That's 3 copies of the same information, right? But this is less than full flooding. Right? In full flooding, everybody will send everybody, and you get 100 numerous copies. Here, at least with 2 MPRs, you probably got 3 copies. All right. Now, so everybody else will not transmit. So this is the business of MPR. Everybody understand the function of MPR? Is that MPR is multi-point relay. Is that I have many neighbors, but not everybody is relay. Only a selected few will transmit. And we have to select enough so that everybody can hear. So now how do we select? So that's the next thing. Selection of MPR. Before I go to selection of MPR, is the forwarding using MPR clear? Right? If I gave you a diagram like this and gave you a packet and not a packet, I asked you how does 3's connectivity will be sent around, you'll be able to figure out, right? Then we'll send it to this neighbor and then we left some MPRs, the MPRs will send it to others, right? For example, in the case of 3, it has only 2 neighbors. How many neighbors does it have? 2. How many MPRs do you need to lead? Both. Because to reach the whole network, I need to lead both of them. So it's both neighbors to be MPR. Whereas 5 has a lot more connectivity, so it doesn't need all those MPRs. So now the next problem is, how do you decide how many MPRs you need? Right? So we are going to go to selection of MPR. Next slide, number 14. Alright. Now, first thing is that there is no set rule. You can select all your nodes as MPR, all your neighbors as MPR. So you can say that I have to get 3, all of them are relaying. If you do that, then you're getting full flooding. If everybody selected all their neighbors as MPRs, then everybody is relaying for everybody, and then you get full flooding. There is no optimization. So the optimization is that you just select a smaller number and you still ensure that everybody gets it. And mathematicians have proven that finding MPR is NP complete. Does everybody understand what that means? If you don't understand, please ask me, what does NP complete mean? Those who understand, since nobody asked me, please tell me what does NP complete mean? Yeah, so it is non-polynomial time is that if you have n nodes, it might take 2 raised to n time, which is exponential time. Right? So if you increase the number of nodes by 1, the time goes by a factor of 2. 2 raised to n plus 1. 2 raised to n plus 2. So it rises very fast. When your problem is in exponential time or non-polynomial time, its complexity goes very fast and generally is not very scalable. You cannot do it for a very large number of n. So here n is the number of probably the size of the network. Okay? So this problem is NP complete. Alright. So having known that means that you cannot really try to find an optimal for these things. What you do is you try to find a heuristic. Heuristic means that it will reduce your work, but it's not guaranteed. It will work most of the time. So what is the heuristic? Heuristic here is that you make 2 sets. Set 1 called N1 and set 2 called N2. Set N1 has all the 1/2 neighbors and set 2 has all the 2/2 neighbors which are not covered. And we will see that in an example in a minute. Then among this, basically MPR is the set of nodes that we have selected as an MPR. Initially it will be empty. And then from N1x minus MPRx, select the node that has maximum connectivity to uncovered node and add that node to MPRx. That's the whole algorithm. That you compute N1x minus MPRx, find the node that has the maximum connectivity, add that to MPR, and that one step is done and keep repeating it. So let's just do that once. And going back to slide number 13, which is one back, not forward. So I'm looking at slide number 13, and we are trying to find out the NPR for 5. Right? What is N1 here? N1 is the all the nodes that are 1/2, and that includes how many numbers are there in that set? 7. N2 includes all the nodes that are 2/2, and right now that will include which nodes? What are the nodes which are 2/2 from 5? 9, 10, good. Keep going. 12, 13, and 1. Right? N1 has 7 members, N2 has 5 members. And what is in MPR? MPR set is empty. So there are 3 sets we maintain, N1, N2, and MPR. Now, in the N1 minus MPR, which is same as N1, in N1, which node has the maximum connectivity? 4 has a connectivity of, it connects to myself and then 4 other nodes, so that's connectivity of 5. 8 has a connectivity which is less, so we calculate everything else, so 4 has the highest connectivity. Right, so we make 4 as our ampere. Right. Once we put 4 into ampere, which nodes get out of N2, which are covered already now? 1, 13, and 12 are covered. So now the only thing left is 9 and 10. So our N2 has only 2 members, 9 and 10. Ampere has 1 member, 4, and N1 has 7 members as before. Right? Now we do N1 minus ampere. So 7 minus 1, we take out this 4, and among the rest of the neighbors, which has the highest connectivity? 8. So you put 8 in, and then what happens to N2? Empty. Once it is empty, we're done. Okay? So, that's the procedure for suction and MPS. Everybody understand that? If everybody, anyone has a question about any of this, this is the homework, by the way, which is coming up later on. So if that is clear, then we move on to slide number 15. Slide number 15 is dynamic source routing, DSR. Can you just say the power? Somehow something like that. No? Okay, all right. Dynamic source routing. If not, I may have to ask you to go and get it. I don't know. But anyway, let's just try it out. Okay, that's it. So DSR is the next scheme, and it is also on demand and reactive, as opposed to the previous one which was proactive. This is on demand. So basically, you just do it when you need it. And what you do is you put the source route on it. Every packet has source route. Now, many of you, I don't know how many of you remember from IP does allow you to put a source route on the packet. So you can put a list of routers that your packets will go to. If you want to go from A to B, you obviously put the destination address and the source address, but you can also put intermediate routers. And then the packet will be sent to those routers. That is called source route. A source route can be loose or it can be strict. Does anybody know the difference between strict and the loose? This is all part of 473, that's what I'm asking. Anybody know the difference between strict source route and the loose source route? The strict means if I tell you that please send to route A, router 1, 2, 3, and 4, the packet has to go 1, 2, 3, and 4. If the 3 cannot reach 4, then the packet doesn't go. Loose source routing means that the packet has to go from 1 to 2 to 2, 3 to 4 with some intermediate routers possible. So it might go from 1 to 2 via 5. From 2 it will go to 3 via 6 maybe, some other things. So we don't know intermediate things, but we are telling the main key points. Alright? So everybody understand how the difference is strict and loose. Loose means there might be more routers than what I'm specifying. Strict means no more routers. This is it. Okay? Don't send it to anybody else. Alright? So what happens is everybody keeps a routing database which has a complete path to wherever you want to go to, and the way you get that is by basically asking when you need it. So you keep your previous memory that, okay, when I sent the packet to 10, the route was, this was the route. But if you don't know, and you can say that I have packet to 10, can somebody tell me the route? You send a route request to all your neighbors. So all neighbors, and in each neighbor will add itself to that request and then ask its neighbor. Alright? At the end, the request will reach the destination, and the destination now has the route. How does it have the route? because all those neighbors which are attached to that request is the path. Right? If the destination finds a request which came from 1, 2, 3, and 5, then it knows 1, 2, 3, and 5 is the path. Right? It sends that back to the source, and then the source knows that and remembers for a while. Any question? Right, the first one is the fastest one. Right, the later request will be discarded. And we really need the fastest one anyway. So I just want to find the best two, maybe you can send the second one as well. Right? But the key in this algorithm is that the first one is the fastest one. So it sends the route request, and everybody sends the route request on the first. If a node knows the route, it appends the rest of the route. So it's quite possible that you don't have to reach the destination. Somebody along the way has that information because it had found the path recently. So if you already know, then you don't forward it anymore. You just say, oh, well, here's the information from me. All right, so that is one thing. If the transmission fails, link error is sent to the source. All routes with that link are terminated. So if suppose somebody cannot forward, so suppose you have a route which says go from 1, 3, 5, 7, and 3 to 5 doesn't make it, then the source is informed, sorry, 3 to 5 is not making it, now it will just throw away all the routes in its database that use 3 to 5. Right? Disadvantage, not suitable for high mobility environments. So where things are moving, your cache is always out of date. Right? It's not good. And then the source route means, packets are very big. You have all these addresses for all these routers along the way, which takes the overhead. But anyway, all this is described in RFC 4728, which is on DSR. OLSR was described in RFC 3626, like that. So these three that we are going to talk about, we're going to mention those three RFCs. Okay? Anyway, so is DSR clear? Basically, you find the route by asking people, and they ask their neighbors until somebody knows the route. Right? Once you have the route, then you can just put that in the packet and send it. If the packet doesn't make it, then you will get it back, and then you will find another route. So here's an example. Slide number 16. In 16, one wants to send a packet to 10, but it doesn't have any information. So it's asked 2, 3, and 4. We have a route to 10. Now 2 does not have the route to 10, so it will ask to 5 and 7. Right? It will ask 5 and 7. 3 already has a route. It knows that I can reach 10 by 5, 9, and 10. 3, 5, 8, 9, and 10. It knows that part. 3, 5, 8, 9, and 10. So then it tells 1 right away that, if you send it to me, I will send it this way. And then the 4 has a part that says 4, 6, 8, 9, and 10. So that also responds. You get 2 routes. 1, 3, 5, 8, 9, 7, or 1, 4, 6, 8, 7, and then one can select one of the 2, and it's done. Right? While this is done, it's quite possible that the request that went to 2 is still going on the network, and it will go on for some time. So unless they hear this response from 3 and 4, which they will not, that request can go on. So there is some overhead for that. So it's clear as to how you forward the routes. Okay? Find out. The last one is AODD. AODD is ad hoc, on-demand, distance vector routing. So the previous one was link state. Now this is a distance vector. And so it is ad hoc, which is clear. On-demand means, what does on-demand will mean? Proactive. Sorry, reactive. Reactive. every node keeps a routing table entry which has a destination, route, but there are two additional things which are not there in the previous one. One is sequence number, actually one additional thing, sequence number. So every entry has a number associated with this, says 3, 4, which is actually more like a time. It's like a timestamp. But rather than keeping a timestamp, it just keeps a number. So my route number, I had learned before that was my learning number 3, but then somebody sent me a new route, so I will say it's 4. Right, so that is sequence number. Each source keeps a broadcast ID counter. So each source also keeps a broadcast ID counter. The request, so I sent you the 10th request, 11th request, 12th request, that's sequence number, right? So that's number I keep. So when I want to get a path, I send a request, I flood a request, and the neighbor broadcasts to their neighbors. Each request has the source address, the source broadcast ID, destination, the source sequence number for the destination. So here's the thing. So if I want to find that node's route, what I say is, look, on my table, I have the route number 3, which is my sequence number for that particular entry, 3. This is my request number 10, which I have already sent you 9 requests before for some other node maybe. But I need, if you have any path which is higher than 3, for node number 10, or node number whatever number that is, right? So everybody will look into their table and see if they have which is better than 3. 3 is actually like timestamp. Just think about timestamp. So it's like 3 p.m. So do they know anything better than 3 p.m.? So if somebody has 4 p.m. information, they will send it to you. When they send it to you, everybody else around the path will hear, and they will remember that 4 p.m. information is this. So now you mark in your table that I have 4 p.m. information, right? And when you want to, next time you want to find path for some reason, actually you just use 4 p.m. information. If 4 p.m. doesn't work, then you say, well, here I want something which is better than 4 p.m. If somebody has a 5 p.m. information, they will send it to you. So everyone understand that sequence number, how that works? The sequence number is like a timestamp, and you tell people that please don't tell me anything if it's older than that. Right? Tell me things which are newer than this. So you reply only if you have a route which has sequence number, and then the intermediate would respond in the reverse path exactly, and everybody learns about that path. So that is the AODB secret. The AODB secret is that you keep a timestamp with every path, and then if you give only newer information. And when the information comes back, I'm on slide number 18 now. Next slide. Slide number 18, it says that basically when you come back, then everybody learns. So not only you learn, everybody else learns. And then the older entries are timed out. If you have something which is 3 days old, you know that it's not good, and if some packet comes in, rather than trying it and then failing, you might as well ask if somebody has a newer entry than that. Now, AODB supports only symmetric links. So everybody understands symmetric? Two-way, right direction. If a source node moves, it must reinitiate REQ. So suppose you're number 1, you're node number 1, but you are here, your connectivity was with these 3 neighbors, but if you go to that location, now your neighbors have changed. So all your paths are different now. Right? So you should do, if you move, then you just find your new paths. If an intermediate node moves, all upstream nodes broadcast a link failure to their upstream neighbors until a source node is reached. So when somebody moves, everybody will tell the source that, okay, this link is no longer good. Disadvantage is that intermediate node may send more up-to-date but still stale routes. What this means is this. Suppose you say, does anybody have better information than 3 p.m.? Now he has 4 p.m., you have 5 p.m., you have 6 p.m. All 3 will respond. Right? 4 p.m. is newer than 3, but it is no good when 5 and 6 is here, right? But I will get that too. I will get 5, even though 6 is coming, but I will get 5. So I may get some information which is stale but newer than what I have. And that is a waste of time. Because it will be good if you just got the latest one. But You can't get the latest one, you get everything and then you find the latest from there. All this is described in RFC 3561. Here's an example. Slide number 19. Example. So 1 wants to send to 10, it sends a request to 2, 3, and 4, and then its entry number says 3. Now 3 is entry number, not the node number. So entry number in node 1 is 3, and it says, can somebody tell me a path to 10 which is better than 3? So node 2 sends it to 5 and 7. Node C3 has 3, 5, 8, 9, but its sequence number is 1. So it knows this is older, this is 1 PM information. Whereas 4 has 4 PM information. Whereas 4 will send it back and you're done. Okay, is the example clear? Alright, that brings us to slide number 20, which is the summary. And the summary is that we have ad hoc niche node infrastructure, so it is good, resilient, and it is useful in military emergency. It's used multi-hop, it is multi-hop wireless. Then we talk about routing, 3 methods, proactive, reactive, and hybrid. Actually, we just talk about mostly 2 of them, proactive and reactive, but you can always combine them with hybrid. AODD is reactive, DSR is reactive, LSR is proactive. So we talked about those. That brings us to the references, slide number 21, Wikipedia articles, 22, reading assignment. So if you read the Wikipedia article and the RFC, if you read the RFC, you're done, because that is most of the information. And then homework, number 19. Oh, actually, numbering is wrong, isn't it? Then we hardly have homework number 19. Yeah, okay. All right, so we are going to renumber this thing. So this would be lesson number 20? 21? All right, so this will be homework number 21. I'm just going to call it number 21. And anyway, so with that, I'm going to just announce the exam results. So let's just finish quickly this.